Hello everyone. In this video, I'm going to continue on with the positive affirmation Neuroart mandala that we've created in the last video. So in this video, we're going to be doing a simple coloring method using watercolors. So in this coloring method, I aim to make your Neuroart mandala look a little bit like having a vortex in the background, streaming either energy out or drawing energy in, whichever way you prefer to look at it. All right. So there is some 3D effect going on. So I've talked about how you can make your art look like a background, like there is a background, there's some depth with it in some of my other videos that has to do with art. So basically in this video you'll see me doing some of the things here, even though it's really subtle and you may not be able to see it in the video unless you look at it really carefully. But once you've completed your painting following this technique, you should be able to see a subtle 3D effect of the whole thing being the background being the background, and your mandala popping forward like it's floating in 3D space. Okay, so without further ado, let's start. So first off, when we start off this, we need to apply masking fluid to the circles of this art piece first, because those are the areas that we don't want paint on. Now, as far as the resources are concerned, I am not going to apply masking fluid in the area where I've drawn out as the resources, but if you'd like to do it, you could do it. Okay, so for my purposes in this video, I will not be applying masking fluid on the resources that I've drawn here. we are going to let the masking fluid dry completely before we move on to the next step. So for this technique, we're doing a wet on wet technique on the entire drawing. So first off, I am mixing the paints to get it ready, because in this tropical climate, the water seems to dry really fast on most paper. So we're gonna get ready the paints and the colors first before we're doing the wet on wet on the art piece. So once we're ready, I'm wetting the back. Once the paints are ready, I'm wetting the back of this board so that the paper would stick to it and remain flat. And very quickly, as soon as the paper is stuck onto the board, I am wetting the entire piece of paper, front and back. And once your paper is sufficiently wet, we start applying the paint. I'm using only yellow and blue here for the paint, and I want the paint to bleed into each other while it's wet. So I'm going to go over the first layer here first. And then when it's relatively dry, so to say, I know that when I know that the paper is still damp, but the paint is kind of sort of dry. Can't really explain to you unless you see it live on a piece of paper. So the paint goes on and there's no more shine, but you can tell that the paper is still slightly damp. And then you apply extra layers onto the outer edges of the paper using the same colors. So this is kind of like glazing. So what happens here is when you apply a first layer of the paint goes on with one color, and when you apply extra layers of paint, more paint goes on, but it gets darker and darker as the more glazing layers you put on. And this is what gives the entire piece of artwork, or at least your background, the 3D effect of the edges of the paper being closer to you and the center of the paper being further away from you. So that's where the vortex effect comes in. And then after everything is done, you want to let the entire artwork to dry completely, as in bone dry, before you decide if you want to make another extra layer on to the edges of the paper to make it darker. Okay, as you can see now, I am quite happy with where it is. So I am going to start taking off the masking fluid when the entire art piece is dry. Now, because I'm using cheap cotton paper here, the masking fluid is going to peel off some of the paper. If it doesn't peel too badly, you can still paint on it. If it peels really badly, then you might have to do the entire art piece all over again. So I am using purple and red for all the circles. Purple for the center and red in the outer circles. And I'm going to dilute the red a lot down to almost pink, which is what you can see here. And then I'm going to do layering again to make the edges slightly darker and let it get lighter towards the center of the circle, like what you see here. So basically I'm doing shading on all the circles with watercolors. And then when you're done, and for the resources, what I'm doing is I'm just using the purple as a glazing layer and also trying to shade the resources with the purple as a glazing layer. So the resources will look darker than the rest of the artwork, especially the background, and that's what separates the background from the foreground. And when you're completely done with all the coloring, you want to let the entire piece of artwork to dry before moving forward with your graphical fixation and field lines. So I'm not going to go over how to do your graphical fixation and field lines in this video because it has already been covered quite a few times in my other videos. I will end this video here and I will talk to you again in the next video.